Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be going over how to undeniably prove God. Now we're doing this through the argument for motion. From my experience, the argument for motion is the best argument to prove someone that God does exist, and that he has to exist, and is also the best for converting atheists. Now, I know a lot of people love arguments such as tag, but the problem with tag, as you can see from Jay Dyer, the atheists never understand it. It's such a complex argument that people don't understand it, and whenever you're trying to show someone or prove God and they don't understand how it proves God or how it even works, it's not going to convert them. Versus something like the argument for motion, it's really easy and simple to understand and defend, so it's really easy to learn. And also, due to that, it's also very easy for an atheist to understand and see how it proves God. Now, what is the argument for motion? The argument for motion is an argument that was coined by Thomas Aquinas to prove God. Essentially, it argues that everything that is in motion, motion meaning change, needs a previous thing to put it into motion. He then ultimately argues that there eventually has to be one of these causes that isn't moved by anything else, which is the first cause, which we understand as God. Now, terms you need to know. Firstly, potentiality or potency. Something that has the potential/ability to do something. There is something that hasn't been actualized yet. For example, an unlit match. Actualization, aka act. Something that is in act/has been actualized. For example, a lit match. Motion, which also means change. Motion is the change from a state of potentiality to a state of actuality. For example, a match going from a state of not being lit to being lit. Cause is something that brings about an effect, the thing that makes another thing go from potentiality to actuality. For example, the thing that would make a match go from being unlit to lit is the striker pad, and you striking it against that. An unmoved mover, also known as a first cause, is a cause that isn't moved or caused by anything else. Now, there's two types of causal chains that you need to know about: per se causal chain and per accident causal chain. A per se causal chain is a chain in which a cause is dependent on a previous cause to go from potential to actual. This dependency is consistent and has to continue as long as it's in a state of actuality. A per accident causal chain is a chain in which it depends on a previous cause, but it does not require that cause to continue for it to stay in act. For example, your mother giving birth to you. Your mother doesn't need to continue to exist for you to exist. Now, the premises of the argument. The premises are: 1, things in the universe are in motion, change. 2, nothing moves/changes itself. 3, a chain of movers can't go on infinitely in a per se causal chain. Premise 4, there must be a first mover that isn't moved by anything else. Conclusion, this first mover is what we call God. Now, how does this prove God? The argument proves God because it shows that a first cause has to exist in order for our existence to exist. The argument is what we call a deductive argument. A deductive argument is an argument where the conclusion is a necessary conclusion. So if you agree with the premises, then the conclusion is necessary. The only way to disprove it would be to disprove the premises. This is also why someone can't just agree with the premises and then say, oh, well, we don't know, maybe it's something that we will figure out in the future, or we can't be sure of, because the conclusion is necessary. It isn't something that you can just deny or choose not to believe if you agree with the premises. Now, how to address the common rebuttals? Firstly, they might ask, how do we know we are in a per se causal chain? This is a very common one, very common question you'll get. We know we are in a per se causal chain because the motion we observe requires a cause that is acting right now to support it. This is different from a per accident causal chain in which earlier causes can stop existing and the effect continues. For example, an example of how we observe that we're in a per se causal chain is a hand moving a stick that moves a stone. If the hand stops, the stick and stone also stop moving. If we were in a per accident causal chain, the hand could stop and the sticks and stone would move on their own. But this is not what we observe, and this is not what happens. Second, a common rebuttal: why can't there be an infinite regress of causes? An infinite regress is impossible because there's nothing sustaining the causes. There are two analogies that I use that I believe explain it best. Firstly, imagine a chandelier that is being held up by chains. The chains are the causes. Each chain link is only holding up the one below it because there's a link that's above it that's holding that link up, right? If there's an infinite amount of these chains and no chain connects it to the roof, the chandelier would fall since there's nothing holding it up and supporting it. Another analogy would be, imagine a train with an infinite amount of cars but no engine. Since there is no engine, the engine being the first cause, there's nothing to pull the train car, so the train doesn't move. Both analogies are great at explaining why there can't be an infinite regress of causes. There simply has to be something to spark and maintain the causes. Otherwise, there is nothing to spark the causes in order for there to be motion. These analogies work because in a per se causal chain, there is a borrowed power. Every chain needs something before it to spark it until there is a first cause. They can't infinitely borrow power if there's no source or switch to give it power in the first place. The third common rebuttal: why can't something just move itself? Something can't move itself because it would violate the law of non-contradiction. For something to move itself, it would have to be in a state of potential and actuality at the same time and in the same respect. Also, this would contradict the very nature of what it means to be in potential and actual. Potential is something that could change but has not yet. Something actual is something that has already changed, already is in that state of change. You can't not have changed yet and also have changed at the same time. It's logically impossible. The fourth rebuttal: why must a contingent being have an external cause maintaining its existence? Contingent beings are the causes/things in motion. If a thing doesn't have its existence on their own and doesn't self-exist, like in a per-accident causal chain, then it must actively be upheld. This is exactly how motion and act works. The contingent beings are in act, but they are dependent on a previous cause to sustain that act. For them, being in act means existing. So if there isn't a previous cause to keep them in the state of actuality, existence, they will cease to exist. Fourth thing, why the universe can't be the first cause. Now, commonly atheists will say, well, the universe is the first cause. This one, another easy one to debunk. The universe can't be the first cause because it doesn't have the attributes required for a necessary being. Necessary being being the first cause. Firstly, the first cause cannot change. It is the unmoved mover. The universe does change. It is constantly expanding. The new galaxies, planets, etc. are forming. Along with that, there's reactions, molecules, compounds, etc. are constantly changing and creating new things. If a first cause could change, then it would once again require a previous cause to allow it to change, which leads to an infinite regress. The first cause is fully actual and has no potentiality. If it had potential, then that means it would have the ability to change. Since the universe isn't fully actual and is changing, it can't be the first cause. Why the first cause can't be a non-conscious being? Now, atheists will argue that in response to it, instead of disagreeing with the premises, they'll say, okay, well, the first cause is just a non-conscious being, like a rock or something. The first cause can't be a non-conscious being for a few reasons. Firstly, the first cause needs an internal principle of action. This means the ability to act or initiate without being initiated by something else. This principle is what we call will or intellect. A non-conscious being is something that lacks will, intellect, and awareness. It would be logically impossible for this being to be the first cause, since it would not be able to be that spark/engine that starts and sustains all the other causes, because it would require something outside of itself to do that, which would mean it isn't the first cause. Along with that, by definition, a non-conscious being or thing can't trigger things on its own. This would mean this being would require something outside of itself to act. This is basically saying that a match can light itself, or a car can create itself from scratch and maintain itself. It's logically impossible. Why this isn't a gods of the gaps fallacy / why can't science or scientific discovery change this argument? This is debunked by understanding the difference between science and metaphysics. Science is limited to empirical things. This means measuring physical things that are made out of matter, etc. Metaphysics deals with necessary non-physical truths, non-empirical truths that can't be measured by empirical means. Metaphysical truths are truths that exist in all realities, while scientific truths are contingent and are based on empirical observations. Science is dependent on metaphysical truths in order for it to work. These include things such as the law of identity, the law of non-contradiction, etc. Due to this, since metaphysics is not physical at all and they are necessary, science can't affect or change them at all. If science could change metaphysical truths, then logic itself would be irrational, and also science itself would be irrational, since in order for science to even work, it requires metaphysical truths. For example, if science could change metaphysical truths, then the law of non-contradiction or the law of identity could change. This would make science illogical because that means the law of identities basically states that A equals A, or like an apple is an apple. It would make science illogical because an apple could not be an apple but actually be a shoe or a headphone, which would make everything, reality itself and science, completely illogical and irrational. Ultimately, it's logically impossible as metaphysical truths and metaphysics isn't empirical at all, and since science only observes and affects the empirical, it is impossible for it to affect something that it can't interact with. That's the same thing as, for example, imagine there's a guy that's in a bulletproof cage, and for me to affect him, I have to hurt him physically. It's impossible for me to affect him physically and hurt him physically because I can't break into that cage, right? It's the same thing with science. Science is restricted to the empirical, and metaphysics isn't empirical. That's empirical truths are this bulletproof cage that it can't get out of. It can't pass to affect and hurt metaphysical truths and metaphysics. Thank you so much for watching. My TikTok is @BugLovesAll. I'm live on TikTok usually Monday through Friday at some point during the day. I'm live on YouTube as well through the week. Come join if you guys have questions or want to debate. I'd appreciate if you guys liked and subscribed and commented any suggestions for future topics. Christ is King.